All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Good evening and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. I am your host, David, and with me as usual is Daniel.
How's it going? What up, y'all?
And we have a very special guest. I'm so happy that this is finally happening. We have Ish from the Better Let Me Tell You podcast.
Hello. Thank you guys for having me on. It's been a long time coming this episode.
Yeah. For the listener, Better Let Me Tell You is an amazing podcast that is also part of the Geek Bro Network. And Ish and I have become pretty good friends over the last couple of years. And in that time, Shiver took a hiatus, and he kept telling me, even before we took a hiatus, he's like,
Yep.
Dude, whenever you have a chance, let me get on there. I really want to do Sleepaway Camp. He mentioned Sleepaway Camp, and this is one of my favorite slashers. And so through the whole time that we were taking this hiatus, he was like, hey, when's Shiver coming back? When's Shiver coming back? And so we are finally back, and I swore to you that it would happen. And here it is.
I like that it's happening before The Conjuring.
Yes.
Yay.
Yeah. But you'll be back for The Conjuring, I think.
Listen, conjure me up.
So, Ish, do you want to give a little bit of your horror background? That's one of the things that we did on our first episode back, as we talked about how we got into horror, what horror means to you. You don't have to give a dissertation or anything, but
Right. No,
just a little bit.
So I've always liked horror movies, but I would definitely say that my deeper dive into horror happened actually while I was living up in New York. I became really, really good friends with this couple, Rick and Joe. And Rick is, to say he's a horror fan is putting it mildly. The man has tats of Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers. Actually, one of his tats is even his niece drew a picture of Jason, and he got that as a tat.
Nice.
So
that is commitment.
Yeah, he is a huge horror fan. So I, at one point I was living across the street or across the railroad tracks from them, and then eventually just next door. And so it was very sitcom-y. Like I was always, the neighbor, always at their house and having drinks and whatever. And I just became more into horror because of him, because it would always be like, let's watch this movie. Let's watch this movie. And I'd be like, okay, cool. And it just became a thing, where now I sometimes just will crave a horror movie. It doesn't matter how bad it is. I'll just I just need to see teenagers in peril sometimes. And that's just, nothing will satisfy that itch. And one of those was this movie, Sleepaway Camp. I actually saw it for the first time ever, not that long ago, really. I was in New York from 2013 to 2016. So for the first time I saw this movie on their couch. I had kind of heard about the movie. I had kind of heard about the twist. Even when you've heard about it, it doesn't prepare you for the execution at the end.
No.
At all.
So, spoiler alert, we will be talking about the twist ending to this movie. If somehow...
It is 38 years old.
Yeah, if somehow a movie that's almost 40 years old has
eluded you,
not managed to be spoiled for you yet.
As somebody who was born the year this movie came out, I petition that we do not refer to it as almost 40 again.
As a 38-year-old movie. As a movie that's been out 38 years.
As the oldest person here, I second that.
Whatever you say.
I'm older than this movie.
I really recommend that you watch this movie before you listen to this podcast. It'll we will ruin the movie for you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So
You've been warned.
Yeah, you have been warned. So that's cool. I like that. I like that a lot. So this movie in particular, we kind of talked about it a little bit. It has a truly iconic twist. There are very few slasher movies that I think can say they have an iconic twist, right? Friday the 13th comes to mind, right?
Right.
Everyone thinks it's going to be Jason somehow, and especially now, so many years after the fact, you've got teenagers that are watching the first Friday the 13th movie thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to see Jason at the end of this movie, and here's Mama Voorhees, right? Psycho is, maybe the most iconic twist slasher, if you want to call it a proto slasher or something like that.
Horror.
But it certainly is horror. So this is, I would call it one of the undisputed heavyweights of the slasher genre. You've got the big three franchises. You've got another couple franchises there, like Child's Play. But yeah, it's great. But as far as slashers go, there's very few that I think could hold its own in the ring with the Sleepaway Camp franchise, because there's more than just this one, right? Although this is the best one.
This is it for me. Like,
I like 2 and 3. To me, it kind of devolves into more standard slasher fare. As bad as it was, I did enjoy seeing the original cast and crew come back for Return to Sleepaway Camp.
Yes.
Which was released back in 2008-ish. If you haven't seen that, you should probably watch that.
That's the only other one I've seen, actually. I didn't see any of the sequels because I was like, no, there's no way, right?
You were not drawn in by Bruce Springsteen's
exactly. So,
sister.
but there was like Return to Sleepaway Camp with these people I know. Okay, now I'm in.
Yeah, to me, Angela is Felissa Rose. And that's it. There's no other way about it. So this is actually one of those rare horror movies and slasher movies in particular that is actually fairly critically acclaimed.
Is it really?
It's got a fairly decent Rotten Tomatoes score. So the majority of critical ratings are positive. I want to say that it's about 80% fresh.
Oh wow.
Let me look this up.
Okay.
Let me verify.
I mean, for a slasher film, that's unheard of, really.
Yeah. It really is. It is 78% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Okay. So, for comparison, Friday the 13th barely breaks the 60s, the 60 percentile on Rotten Tomatoes.
Johnny Depp's only good for 70 votes.
That's it. So
hey, for the record, that's Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I didn't want to be that guy.
Nope.
But since Ish is going to be that guy, that is Nightmare on Elm Street. Although that death is so
it's iconic. That is iconic.
Truly iconic. When we did on Mount Geekmore, our top 4 horror movie deaths, that was my number 1.
It should be.
Yeah. Actually, now that I think about it, was it the chest burster from Alien? I think that was number 1. Yeah.
Also acceptable.
Also, yes, I think the only one that may outdo it. So this movie is, fairly well received critically, 78%. That's nothing to shake a stick at. As far as fan reception goes,
is that
you like that? Shake a stick at it?
Is that a spoiler for the end of the movie?
The fans love this movie. I mean, this is one of those things where like pretty much every horror fan that I know who has seen this movie loves this movie. So as sort of like an overall, do you like this movie? Do you think it works as a whole, like as a whole film? Daniel, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so this is a movie that I saw when I was in high school. This was a blockbuster. I like that VHS cover art pick.
Yeah.
And so that is how I ended up watching Sleepaway Camp. So I've seen it. I've seen it a couple of times, and it's one that I do like it. I think that there's a lot that really works with it. I know there are some things we're going to get into later with the casting and some of the directorial decisions and some things like that. I feel like in a time when slasher films were starting to kind of go off the rails with what they would show after some of the ones that we were talking about earlier started to become more popular, and they did start to get more into that fantastical ways of killing. Sleepaway Camp was a movie that took this very, less is more approach. And they would show you kind of what was happening and then the aftermath, but maybe not a lot of what was in the middle. And that left a lot up to the imagination. You get to wonder, it's just like there are so many things that are done well with this, with the kills and stuff like that. The story as a whole, from beginning to end, I think it makes a lot of sense as you start to get to the end. There's one scene in particular that still kind of baffles me. But I think I get what it's about now that I'm an adult. I'm still not 100% sure. But as a whole, yeah, I think the movie works really well. I think it tells a great story. I think it's a lot of fun to watch. I think there are a lot of things that are just done very well to continually set the stage for what's going to happen next. The sequencing in this movie is spectacular. And so that's one of the things. It keeps moving at just the right pace for that, that 90-minute benchmark of what makes a good slasher.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, I will preface this by saying that I genuinely like bad movies. I am that gay guy who will just be like, no, but you've got to watch it. It's so horrible. It's wonderful. So I preface that to say that I really like this movie. All of its faults. But what I really like about this movie is watching it for the first time with someone who has never seen it.
Yes.
Because that happened actually in preparation for this. I watched it last night, and I watched it for the first time ever with my boyfriend. And it's like, it's for all intents and purposes, it's kind of standard slasher fare, right? So up until a certain point, they're kind of watching it, like, especially nowadays, you're kind of on your phone. They're kind of whatever. They're not really quite paying attention. But then toward the end, I was like, all right, now pay attention, because these are my favorite parts. And afterwards, like, that reaction of just like, the fuck did I just watch?
Yeah.
To me, that is why I love this movie so much, because like I said it, and I don't know if we should just spoil right now the ending.
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, ultimately, the plot is, we follow Angela and her cousin Ricky at Sleepaway Camp, and we find out that, years ago, the character of Angela was involved in a boating accident with her family, including her younger brother. They all died. She was raised by Ricky's insane aunt, who, by the way, I want to have dinner with that woman in character. And so, then she sends him off to Sleepaway Camp, whatever. There's a series of murders. You find out at the end that Angela is the murderer, but you find out because Angela, the last frame of the movie shows Angela fully naked with a dick, because apparently when the aunt adopted the little boy, she was like, no, I've already got a little boy. That won't do. Now you'll be Angela instead of Peter. So when you watch that ending, because at the end, and I just watched a documentary on the whole movie earlier today too, they obviously could not have a 13-year-old girl posing with a strap on. That's just not right on so many levels. They created a mask of this girl's face, and then they hired some college age student. They shaved him down. They paid him, and he's just standing there in all his naked glory with the mask on. But the mask is her face frozen in this like snarled expression.
Primal scream.
Yeah. And then all you hear is like, ah! And it's like, when did she even have that degree of depth to her voice? Like, and that's like, and then it's like, and roll credits.
Yeah. And it freezes on that. And rolls
there's
the
that
credits
freeze
on
frame.
top of it.
Yes.
Well, actually, if you're watching this live, if you're only listening, you can watch this live. You should watch it live. We've got a picture in the background. You can't really see it that well because our faces are kind of covering it. But the picture turns green It goes into like this sort of like monochrome green, which it comes out of nowhere, and it's almost as shocking as seeing a dick on who you thought was a teenage girl this whole time.
Yeah, and then it's just like curtain down, like that's it, and then that's it. We left Sleepaway Camp, right? And it's just like literally. I remember that's what I say. The first time I ever saw it, I knew the twist, right? But I didn't know how it was revealed. And I remember, having like a freaking old fashioned in one hand and just drinking it and putting it down and turning to my friend Rick and being like, the fuck is going on here? And then it's done, right? Like, and that's it. And so for that reason alone, I recommend watching this movie. There's, you mentioned something, Dan, that I think is interesting. It's, you said that there's not a lot of, the kills are, they're pretty standard fare and what have you. But that's another thing I love about it, because the killer ultimately is a 13, 14-year-old girl. The kills are not implausibly achieved by someone that age.
One of them is.
Well, no, but I'm saying in general, like, that's true. But in general, like, you've got, like somebody being, smothered with a pillow.
Right.
Somebody like, even when there's a knife involved, the girl's in the shower and it's, an aluminum wall. Like, it's feasible that someone that age could theoretically do it. Like, she's not doing Jason style kills.
Right. Well, and it also, as we go forward with it, they're also not only plausible as her being able to pull them off, but they make sense as the type of thing that a 13 or 14-year-old would think of to kill someone. When you look at some of the kills, it's like, oh, well, there's a pot of boiling water, I'll make that fall. It's like these are things that all make sense for someone that age, whether or not they are some sort of just absolute, depths of insanity, don't know what's going on. Like they all make sense as something that you could come up with in that moment.
Can we also talk about that pot of boiling water? Like that thing, that pot was like 6 feet tall. And then they show the corn that he's supposed to be boiling in it. And it's like 6 stalks of corn. Like it's 6 like ears of corn. Like, why did that pot have to be so gigantic? But again, these are things that I enjoy.
How else would it burn his whole body then, Ish?
but these are the things that I love bringing up and mocking it, I guess, in a way, but it's because I genuinely enjoy it, because I see somebody's heart going into this, right? Like, this was not made for a cash grab. This was made because somebody really wanted to make this movie, and I can appreciate that.
Yeah. I kind of feel the same way. This was a movie that the first time I saw it, and kind of like Ish, I was introduced to this movie very late. I saw it for the first time maybe only like 6 years ago, and I saw it on a whim. It was on sale on iTunes for like $5. And I'm always on the prowl for a good iTunes sale. And so I was like, man, you know what? I've heard so much about this movie, but I did not know the twist.
Oh, okay.
I've heard so much about this movie. I know that this is supposed to be, one of those, like, you got to watch it before you die slasher movies. So, instead of renting it and, paying almost the same amount of money, let me just buy it.
Fair.
And I can watch it over again if I want to. And I did. And I watched it over again and over again. And it became one of those things where anytime that I found myself with a little bit of downtime and no one was home, I was watching it because it's so fun. It's so playful. But it's also trash, right? So like, I can't watch this with my son home. Right. And
no.
And then no. And when my wife and I are sitting down to watch TV, we're usually going to watch something that we both want to watch together. So I have had the distinction of being able to introduce this movie to two people who were totally oblivious to the twist. One was my best friend Andre a couple years back. After I saw this movie, he's another one who, like you, Ish, he loves a good bad movie, right? So I saw this thing a couple times, and I went over to his house, and I was like, "Dude, you got to watch this fucking movie." All right, and we sat down with like a case of beer and some popcorn, and by the time the beer was done, he was looking at me like, bro, what the fuck are we watching? But he was laughing his ass off. He loved the movie. And when it was finally over, he looked at me and he was like, that is one of the best slasher movies I've ever seen, because it's so campy.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think this movie gets, is that a horror movie that takes itself seriously has to deliver on all fronts. So if you're going to be as serious as Halloween, right, you have to deliver like Halloween does, right? Which is why I think you get movies like the Friday the 13th franchise has, where they're tongue-in-cheek, where they're self-aware, where they're gonna up that camp factor to make it fun for you. Because at least if you can't enjoy it from a movie making perspective, right? Like, this isn't high art, right? But it is a lot of fun, right? So that's kind of what this is. And then, like you, Ish, I was able to sit down with my wife, and I said, hey, so we're going to be doing this. And she's like, oh, so Ish is finally getting his episode. I said, yeah. And I said, do you want to watch this with me? And I'm pretty sure it's only because it was your episode. And she was like, yeah, I'll watch this with you, even though she's a big fan of horror. So she watched it with me. And the first thing she asked was, do I have to pay attention? Or can I be like on TikTok while I'm watching? I'm like, as long as you watch the first scene and the last scene, you're good.
Right.
But she ended up watching the whole thing. Like, she found herself like just getting sucked into the movie. And I think it does that because there is an authenticity to it. There is a humor to it, and there is a depth to it. You start realizing at some point in this movie that there's more to it than just what's on the surface. So I really do like this movie. And that kind of leads me into the first major thing I want to talk about, which is, and I know that we just talked about how fun the movie is, but it's socio-cultural significance. This movie is fairly significant in horror. Whether it was done purposely or by virtue of simply wanting to shock the audience, right? The director, Robert Hertzlich, made a movie that is significant in the pantheon of horror and slashers, which are typically not very conscious of what's going on in society, right? So we've got the topics of gender primarily being tackled here, sexuality being tackled here to a lesser degree than gender. And does this elevate the movie to something else? Or is this a somewhat overt example of homophobia and transphobia, which transphobia not so much back in the 80s, but homophobia certainly was something that you found a lot in movies and in horror movies specifically. So is this a sort of out and proud movie, or is it something that is like wagging its finger?
So since you sent the ideas for the topics, this was something that I never really considered, because I always just kind of thought about at the end finding out that she had been raised as a girl but was a boy up until a point in her life. However that kind of works out for this character. I always just kind of viewed that as shock factor, because she's always, it is, like we talked about, there is a 13, 14-year-old girl who plays the role of Angela. And so, granted, in 83, I don't, I'm not, I can't put my finger on, we definitely, here's a trans actress that we would have cast in that role. But so I never really thought about it as being something like that. I've always just kind of considered it like a shock factor thing that, and so once you sent that, I was like, I maybe just kind of happened accidentally, like so many things that you can get attached to, or that certain communities attach themselves to, even though they weren't necessarily made with that particular message in mind, or things like that. So I think that it was really just about shock factor at the end. It was like, how can we really screw with their heads?
Yeah.
Because she's always presented as just like a cis female. And so her having a relationship with a boy and things like that didn't seem like any sort of message or something like that with any deeper meaning, outside of just continuing to play into this idea so that you are shocked at the end, was all that I could really come up with. Now, granted, I'm on the outside looking in when it comes to certain issues like that. So it's not something that I've ever really looked for. It's just kind of been banging around in my head since you brought that up earlier. But I think that the twist at the end and finding out that she was a boy raised as a girl, and it just kind of assumed this gender identity role, I think that part is more about shock factor. But I do think that that when you look at it through that lens, there's a fascinating, there's a fascinating argument to be made there for sex versus gender. Being raised and told that you're a girl, granted not a choice that this child made,
right.
But something that was forced upon them. But that just goes to show that that so much of what we consider gender norms and things like that are the concept of gender is societal anyway. So I did kind of reach that conclusion, but I the rest of it I'm not 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you. I think it's weird because I agree with you, but then I also, like, the more I sit with it and peel back, the more I'm like, I agree with you, asterisk, right? I do think that there's a certain degree of just like, okay, well, the ending was there for shock value. It's like, she's a boy, right? That type of thing. But then you also, like Dan was saying, you start to peel it back and it's like, okay, right. But she, first of all, I don't consider, and I've seen this referred to, but I don't consider her a trans character or person, because in my, and maybe I'm very limited, but in my perspective, someone who is trans has made that decision based on who they feel they are inside. Like you said, this was imposed upon Peter to become Angela. So I'm hesitant to say Angela is a trans character. I mean, I guess in technicalities, maybe, but it's just one of those things where it's like, this is not, it was not something that she decided for herself. But then you've got, okay, well, what happens to a kid when, and now let's add the layer of trans in 2021 parlance, right? You have a boy who's telling you he's a girl and you're like, no, you're a boy. No, you're a boy. No, you're a boy. This child eventually will have some type of psychotic break. Mm-hmm. So, let's reverse that, right? We've got the situation where it's like Peter is a boy and it's like, no, and you're Angela. You're Angela. This crazy bitch, your aunt is stressing it to you.
That will work.
That will work. I put a red string around my finger.
I do believe Angela means angel.
Yes. So,
yes, I believe it does.
And let's be honest, any of us living with that woman would have broken. Like, kudos to Ricky for being halfway normal. And not at all being the actual psycho.
Well, there is a theory, and it's just a theory because it's not really suggested by the finale of the movie, but there is a theory that Ricky was in on it, and that Ricky was actually helping
I don't think so.
Angela. I don't think so.
I don't think so, because they go to great lengths to show you that when Peter arrives at the house, the aunt says something to the effect of like, oh, but I already have a boy, Ricky. Well, Ricky will be happy when he gets back and has a sister, like something to that effect. So I don't know that Ricky knew, or I don't think he knew. My opinion, I think he was completely in the dark.
Yeah, I don't think that it's suggested by the film. I think that it's just the director trying to play with us, which is why we see Ricky in silhouette against the light of the entrance at the door before the coochie burning scene, So maybe one of the greatest deaths in all of horror history.
I mean, for that alone, this movie deserves some type of honorary Oscar or something. I'm just saying.
But one where he's holding a curling iron.
Right, exactly. Yes.
And
his face is just like, oh, you know. But I wanted to touch on this. You know, you mentioned, Dave, you know, homophobia and all of that, and I think it's interesting because, you know, one of the things is that we never see the children, Angela's and Peter and Angela. I don't know. We never know what his sister's name was, actually, if you think about it.
Right.
Because Angela was just is the name that was given to him, and he was Peter. We never see their mother, but we do see that their father is in a relationship with another man. And the kids, you know, walk in on them and start giggling or what have you. Well, the father's dead within the first 5 minutes of the movie, right? Because if not, you don't have orphan child.
Correct. Yeah.
And so initially I'm kind of like, well, is this one of those, like, you know, the gay guy had to die and pay for, you know, and now she's paying for the sins of the father because that was wrong. Is it a morality play? This, that, and the other. But then on the flip side of it, this movie, the last time I saw a movie that was this sort of preoccupied with the various states of undress of the male figure, it was Jeepers Creepers 2. Because there is no okay, I get that it was 1983, right? I get that it was 1983, and barring my personal wardrobe, everybody back then, as opposed to now, lived in short shorts. Like, it's, but every guy is like, you know, like really in really good shape, is wearing short shorts, crop tops, shirtless, in their underwear or what have you. So
and slinging schmeat in those tidy whities.
I mean, I'm saying if I wasn't gay before, it was just, I mean, sleepaway camp indeed. But it makes me like, okay, but was that just the times? Okay, fine, the short shorts maybe, but like they're just, again, they're not like other slasher movies. You don't see tits in this movie. You don't see the exploitative presence of, you know, the young girls. I don't know if that's because the teenagers in this movie were actually being played by teenagers, which is probably a big part of it. I hope because
but there were older camp counselors who were of age,
right? Yeah, Meg,
Meg, you know, who could have been told by the director, like, hey, listen, you know, this is going to be your shower scene.
Yeah,
you know,
even her shower scene.
Even in Meg's shower scene, you don't really see anything.
Like, I've seen like Mormons wearing less in a shower scene than Meg was. Like, yeah. So I don't know that I have the clear answer, but I can definitely see why this has become a sort of LGBT cult iconic horror classic, you know, because at the end of the day, that's a community that doesn't really have many horror icons,
right?
You know, if you stop and think about it, it's at best we've got Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct. That's a thriller. I don't consider that a horror movie. And then if you want to get creative, maybe Freddy Krueger, because he's equal opportunity. So like, and I don't even think Freddy's bi. I think he's just slutty. You know, it's just
Pan Freddy.
Yeah, exactly. He's Pandremusal. But there might be something to that too, you know, until the LGBT community gets kind of like its own, you know, slasher per se.
Well, and there's a beauty in that, in art being what you make it, and a community finding something that they can latch onto and make theirs, even if it wasn't made to be theirs. Right. Like, I could, this is just from personal experience, but in my personal experience, there is a huge gay following to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But to the best of my knowledge, that TV show wasn't made with that fan base in mind. They just
even Willow didn't come out until later in the series.
They just really latched on to this idea that the powerful female lead, and they took this thing and they made it theirs. And that's what's, you know, art is what you make it. And if you can find something and make it yours, then more power to you.
That's kind of what I was going to say. Is you know, I'm kind of in agreement with both of you that I don't think Robert Hertzlich had this in mind when he made the movie. He says in an interview that he had a beginning and an end when he when he first started writing this movie, and the rest just kind of wrote itself. And he wanted to make a movie that left the audience, where the final frame of the film left the audience in shock, so that as they were leaving the theater, they would be shocked, as opposed to Friday the 13th, where the shock comes and then there's a chase, or Psycho, where the shock comes and then there's a chase. There is no chase. The chase occurs before the shock, right? The whole scene where the owner of the camp, I forget his name, Mel, basically beats Ricky to death, near death. That whole scene is very frantic. The tension is over by the time they get to her, right? Yeah. Because they know she's the killer. They know that it's her because they have found Ricky. And it can't possibly be Ricky.
Well, no, but they still don't know it's her.
They're just looking for her because she's missing.
Right, because they found Meg is dead and somebody else. Oh, and the children had been murdered as well on the camping trip. So they don't know it's her.
They don't know. We, the audience, know.
Yes.
At that point, we, the audience, know that it's her and that it isn't Ricky. There is a great essay that I read once by a literary critic named Roland Barthes, French dude. And it was called The Death of the Author. And in it, he says that once a literary work leaves the author's desk, it no longer belongs to the author, and it belongs to the reader. And so whatever a reader, or in this case, the audience, views in that thing or reads in that thing, is there. Right. Because if you are picking up on some subtext, or maybe it's overt, right? You're picking up on something there. Maybe it wasn't even something that the author had in mind, but it's something that is there. It's something that is present. And that's why something like the work of Shakespeare is still so relevant today. Because even though they were issues that were present in the 15th century, in the 16th century, they are still issues that are present today in a different way, right? So I do see, and of course, I'm looking at this, from outside of the discourse community, of the LGBTQ community, right? But from what I see is a movie that is preoccupied not just with Angela's gender, but with her sexuality. Notice that she doesn't really respond to any of the sexual advances that are there.
Well, that girl doesn't respond to anything.
Well, she doesn't. She doesn't respond. She doesn't respond to much. There is only one time where she begins to respond, right, out on the beach, and the moment that her truth is about to be revealed, that's when like she kind of shifts gears, right? So I don't see in Angela a lot of confusion necessarily about her sexuality. I do see it about her gender, where she doesn't really understand whether she is internally a boy or a girl. Whereas I don't think that she really sees herself as or himself, right? Peter doesn't see himself as gay because he's not really into what's going on, right? And when he's in that moment as Angela, and then once he realizes shit, Peter's about to be revealed, snaps out of it and says, "Well, I can't do this right now." So a lot has been said about the how gender and sexuality need to be treated as two different
they are
two different topics entirely. And I think that we see that going on with Angela. So I totally understand why this is something that has been embraced by that community, because I mean, how can it not? It's a movie that even broaches the subject in a genre that never does,
and a time when that, again, to your point, like was it intentional? You can make the argument either way, right? Because we don't know, right? But it still was done in 1983. Like, don't, you can't lose sight of that. And no matter how clunky it was or may have been, like, I don't know that this movie would even get made nowadays. I don't think so. that you could make. No, because number one, it would have like an all-star cast and it would be weird. But I think now also there's this feeling of, when any underrepresented community finally gets its chance in the spotlight, it has to be uber positive and uber the best light possible. So I don't even think that you would be allowed to have a trans, serial killer, right? Because it just, and again, it's fraught with a lot of things, but it's like, well, that just further reinforces what people think, that they're a danger and they're going to kill our children.
Yeah.
So
it's the villainization of a minority group. Yeah.
Right. So I don't even know that could happen nowadays, just from that perspective. Forget having it remade,
Andy says this is seriously taboo, and I agree. It is something taboo. You don't. We were often told that you don't talk about sex, you don't talk about religion, and you don't talk about politics, and I guess you don't talk about gender now. Either. Just to keep things PC. It's just not something that you will find in a movie anymore. And that might be a good thing or a bad thing,
Yeah. Maybe 20 years from now.
I haven't decided yet whether it is, because I watch movies like Blazing Saddles and laugh my ass off and say, oh man, I wish they still made movies like this. But then I watch all the movies that were like that and were not good. And I'm like, oh,
right.
Man, thank God they don't make movies.
Well,
like this
and you don't even have to go that far back. I mean, you just go back to that rash of late 90s, early 2000 films where like a running joke was like, oh, well, this is essentially sexual assault, but we're teenage boys. And and I mean, so you don't even have to go, as far back as Blazing Saddles. You look at that and it's like, ooh, yeah, no, we did. We laughed. And you still kind of look at it and you laugh at those things, but then you're like, well, yeah, but that whole thing.
I think it's also about context. And I think because we were there at that time, we look at it from a different lens, but
nostalgia definitely has something to do with it.
Right. But listen, if we want to talk about, the sexual assault thing, I mean, this movie, blatantly the chef, like as these prepubescent girls are walking through, he's like, oh yeah, they're all nice and clean and shaven. And then the worst part is that nobody
where I come from, we call them baldies.
Baldies.
Wow. I had forgotten about that line and I looked over at Stephanie and I was like, holy shit, I'm so sorry you had to hear that.
What's even worse than the fact that line exists, because, okay, great. The chef says it, so early on he's a villain. He's gonna be one of the first to go. Like, as extreme as it is, it serves its purpose, right? The worst part about that, though, is that, like, I guess the sous chef, if they have one at sleepaway camps, when he says this, he's just like, "Oh, you," and it's just like, no, you're even older than he is.
They throw that one like throwaway line in there where he's like, "These girls can't even think about some of the stuff that you're thinking about," and then he's like, they just need to be told what to do, and then they all laugh it off, like,
they're not too young, you're just too old,
right?
Is what he says to him.
Yeah. That's it.
That's the worst part, because again, the villain being the villain is one thing, but for nobody on the sidelines, just be like, "The fuck is wrong with you?" Like, no, like, no.
It takes Ricky to stand up to him.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, you know what? Can we stop for a second and just applaud? Ricky was probably the only really decent actor in this.
I know we're going to get to actors. I guess this is good segue into it, right? Is that what's coming up next?
It is a good segue.
Sorry.
That's the next thing.
No, it's great because I do want to talk about Ricky. Like, yes, Ricky is so great. I mean, just acts his ass off this. The fucking swagger on this kid. I mean, when he just like strolls into like the dance with that big ass cowboy hat on, no fucks given, just owns the room, right? Sitting there playing baseball with the counselors. Can we take a second to appreciate how good the comeback "eat shit and live" is when someone says "eat shit and die"?
Yes.
That line. Yes. I love that line.
He's quick-witted. He stands up for his family, like, and takes no shit off anyone.
Yeah. No, and well, I think the swagger may have come from the fact that he was playing, I think, like a 13-year-old, but he was 17.
Yeah,
okay.
At the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a little older, and so I think that's where it comes across. But I agree with you 100%. He's like the de facto hero. I mean, he doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
But I guess he's the protagonist of the movie as opposed to the antagonist. And he really, I mean, again, still to say he was 17, and in this movie, which I know the bar is kind of low for horror movies and acting ability, but he was good. Like, you know, every time he walked into a scene, he knew, you know, when to go a little over, when to go a little under, when to just, you know, hit it down the middle. Also, you mentioned the baseball game. I think that shit is still going on. That is the longest scene I've ever watched in a movie in my life.
Yeah, I think baseball scenes in Sandlot were shorter than that one.
Jesus, I think the season of MLB is shorter than that scene. Like, it goes on forever. Oh Lord.
Apparently Robert Hertzlich wanted to have a couple of scenes that reminded the audience what summer camp was actually like. And I mean, I can certainly attest to, I never went to sleepaway camp.
We're Hispanic, we wouldn't.
Yeah, my Cuban parents were like, you know, no, esos son para los americanos, tú te quedas aquí en Miami.
Tú duermes en casa. You sleep in the house.
En casa. Yeah.
If you want, you can sleep outside in the yard.
Yo te pongo un tent allá afuera y ya todo está bien.
Yeah.
You come in, you have your grilled cheese. Yeah. My parents speak perfect English. They don't speak broken English, but it fit. So he wanted to have some of that authenticity of summer camp, and that's one of the things that you do in camp is you're gonna go outside, you're gonna play football, you're gonna play baseball, you're gonna do these things. And
there were even moments that if you took the horror elements out of it, it almost seemed like it could be like a coming of age movie almost.
Yeah.
You know, the interaction again, because the kids are kids, and you know they're you know having little adventures or whatever, and yeah, I guess the baseball scene adds to that. You know, just they're kids being kids.
Well, that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to focus on was he hired children. He wanted kids. So we see young kids, you know, like under 10 years old. We see teenagers. The primary cast is teenagers. And then we see a couple of the older camp counselors. But there's very, very few adults. You know, Mel, what's the name of the like his right-hand man? Yeah,
Gino.
The really muscly guy,
the really buff guy. Yeah.
Well, and Ronnie is the really buff guy. Gino is like the slightly less buff, wears the crop top all the time.
Crop top.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Can I get
that
a special movie with both of them?
Ronnie does come back for return to Sleepaway Camp.
Still juiced.
He's still juiced. Yeah, and still looks good. Still looks good in those shorts. Yeah. So that's and the police officer with that awful
mustache.
That's pretty much it as far as adults go. They're all kids. Do you think that adds something to the movie, or did it detract from it at points? Like, was the acting bad because they were kids and therefore like sucked you out of the movie, or did the fact that they were children add like an element of realism?
So I'm not going to say the acting was bad. You know, I think that them being children, I think that where we get the best feel for them being children playing into these roles coming across more naturally are any sort of scenes with anything romantic happening. Like, because they were using teenagers, they perfectly captured that awkwardness of getting a first kiss, or like, you know, just making out, and like why is it so wet, and like just the little pet kisses and stuff like that, where it's like, these are obviously like kids. Like it was every that moment, those moments when you are a teenager are so painfully awkward. And because they cast teenagers to do these painfully awkward moments, they weren't having to act. That was probably pretty awkward for them. And that comes across. Yeah, that comes across beautifully because of that choice to use that's my biggest takeaway, honestly, when it comes to the using the kids. Like, they shoot off at the mouth at each other and stuff like that. The fights are real juvenile. They're just kind of rolling around on the floor in a clump. But man, those romantic scenes are really when you're like, yeah, these are teenagers.
Yeah, same. It actually adds to it, I would say, overall, because how many times have we seen this where, we're watching like a Friday the 13th or what have you, and they're like, oh, we're going to camp. And I'm like, really? Aren't you 42? Like, why are you like, shouldn't you be like signing up for AARP at this point? Like, not going to sleepaway camp? And so the fact that they are kids, it lends a certain believability. And that's why you can have those scenes where they're just getting into like, they're doing stupid shit with each other, or the baseball scene or what have you,
the water balloon scene, stuff like that.
Yeah. Where and I'm sorry, Angela, I know you got mental issues going on there, but that was one water balloon, and she went down like if she had been hurled a bucket of rocks. Like,
and then Mel goes, "You could take out an eye.
Her eye.
Pump the brakes."
With what? With what? But I think it adds to it, and then I will say though that it kind of makes me feel a little bad when I just wind up like really hating some of these children.
Right.
Because like from the beginning, you're just like, okay, Judy needs to die. And then,
well, I was going to
15,
say,
so like
Meg and Judy kind of deserve the hate.
Well, Meg more so, because Meg was a counselor, meaning that she was what, like maybe closer to 18 than
right.
I mean, she shakes Angela at one point where it's just like, woman, control yourself. You're getting paid to do this. Like, calm down. And then we find out that she's like got a thing for Mel, which is really weird.
So
okay, so I don't think that Meg had a thing for Mel. I think that Meg thought, whether or not it was true, that Mel was someone who could be used as a sugar daddy.
Okay, still, but Mel, she was let's say she was 19. Like, let's put her a year over the legal limit, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. Mel was what, in his early 200s?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Like, if you had told me that she was like, trying to get it on with this guy, the Ronnie, Ronnie, you could tell he was maybe in his late 20s, early 30s, right? Like somebody a little like older, but still kind of like, okay, I get it. But it's like, I mean, she's like the original Anna Nicole. If that's what happened, what you're saying is what happened, I mean, okay, go on, Meg, with your bad self, but no.
I'm not saying I would have. All I'm saying,
lies. You wanted that sweet sleepaway camp money.
Oh man, Mel and the way he held that cigar.
It's all about the cigar. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
My boyfriend was like, is he in a different movie? Like, is he in a, he's like
a Goomba.
Yeah, he's like, why is this mafia guy in this movie? Like, what is this?
Also, I thought it was really creepy. One of the creepiest things, and I thought it was really good of the guy who played Mel to do this, when like he's all prepared for his date, his big date with Meg.
Yeah.
Someone tells him that Meg went to the showers. He goes to the shower. He sees her dead. Before he leaves, right, he says, "Oh, I'll get him, Meg. I'll get him." He stops as he's leaving, and he looks over at her like naked body, the mutilated dead body, and he stops to look her up and down one more time.
Yes,
that was such a like dirtbag, creepy move. Like, man, you know what? Like, that guy, I think, is actually like a fairly decent actor.
Well, she's dead. He's not.
They have a pill for that now.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I personally like the fact that there were kids for this. To me, I think it did add realism to it. It's a movie that doesn't take itself too seriously. So for me, it wasn't one of those things where it sucked me out of the movie.
It was just FYI on Mel. This was the last movie he ever made.
Yeah.
Like they forced him out of the industry?
I don't know. It's just on his Wikipedia. It just says Sleepaway Camp 83 as Mel, final film role.
Oh. Yeah. Well, thanks for the memories, I guess.
Yeah.
Even though they weren't so great.
He's like, nope, that's it. My mark has been made on the world.
That's it.
He escaped. He escaped at the end.
Yeah,
that's true. He ran away.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. He took an arrow through the throat.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Oh, and
he beats Ricky. He thinks to death, and then he's standing there. He's like, "It can't be you. It can't be you." Arrow through the throat.
So,
Ish is gone.
We just lost Ish. I hope his phone didn't die. He should be able to. Let me text him and tell him he can come back in using that same thing.
But as we text him to get on back, like we were saying, it's interesting that when you look at the older characters, when you look at Mel, we were talking earlier about how the cook is so obviously the villain. It's weird and hard to kind of tell whether we're supposed to feel like Mel is like he's like villain light, right? Like until he beats a child to death.
Until the end.
But
Right.
But
he thinks he's doing the right thing at that point, though.
Right, he does think he's doing the right thing, and then up until that moment, it's like, all right, so you're an asshole who's more worried about his money than the fact that kids are dying here.
Yeah,
you can't be forcing guys like Ronnie to keep their mouths shut.
Right.
While the police are there and inquiring about what happened, and then at the last minute decide you're going to take the law into your own hand and believe that you are beating a child to death.
Listen, that's just what they do.
I gotta get out of here. So his death. I'm glad that you reminded me of his death, because that does kind of lead me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is special effects. I personally think that this movie has some killer special effects, all pun intended. Despite the fact that we really never see the kill, with the exception of Meg's shower scene, we never see the kill. So there's not much gore. This is a genre or a subgenre where gore is like a movie lives and dies by gore, right?
Especially for an R-rated one.
Yeah, it's like blood and boobs. That's all you need to be a successful slasher movie. So, considering the fact that we, with the exception of once, never see the kill, how effective are these special effects, do you think?
I think that the makeup that's done to show us the aftermath of the kills is done spectacularly. The burns on the cook. I mean, you can feel how bad that must hurt, because you can see the skin peeling off. You
can also see the welts that are starting to form. Right. They pumped air through. I think he said it was the special effects guy said in an interview it was like gelatin or something like that. So they would make these boils come up and subside as he was breathing and shouting, and it added a real sense of realism. I was watching this on a fairly large TV, and I was like, damn, that looks pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, there's
for pustules.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good ones, but man, watching it again this time and keeping that in mind, okay, we're gonna be talking about special effects, that was the one that I was like, the way, I said, just the way that when you just see his hand shoot up and then you see his face, and it's not just just painted red or overt, oh, it burned to the bone. You can see it looks like skin blistering and separating and peeling, and if you've ever had a second degree burn, you could feel that scene.
Yeah. But I'll say to the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got the one kid who's killed under the canoe. And while the effect looks good, right? When they uncover him, I mean, got the snake coming out of his mouth or whatever. My issue is that when they uncover him, this literally happened like maybe 6 hours ago, and that body looks like it's been in the river for a week and a half. Like,
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like you said, like with the burns, it's perfect, right? Because it looks like it would, and it's not. But then on the flip side, you've got this kid who like just drowned, and he looks like he's been floating in there, since 3 summers ago, and they just found him now under the canoe. So it's a little all over the place. And again, I know in this genre you have to go big or go home.
The burns as well. Like if a pot of boiling water had just fallen on him, he would just be red.
Right.
Yeah. Those the burns themselves wouldn't have formed until it would have taken not very long, a time, right. just a couple of minutes, but he would not have looked like that. He would have looked like that eventually.
But I feel like that's more believable. Even with that quick, even in that quick period of time versus this poor guy, who drowned.
Well, and like the bees too,
or lack thereof.
Right. We don't see a single bee until the guy's dead, right? But you would not have looked that way after approximately what was it, 10 seconds of being attacked by bees.
I've seen someone with a severe bee allergy be stung, and it swells up pretty quickly. But yeah, he had like the big festering boil here on his arm and stuff that had already started.
It looks fantastic.
Yeah.
It looks really, really great. I think one of the things that you have to do as a special effects artist, if you don't have a crazy budget. And this movie didn't. It had a budget of $350,000 total.
Wow, that's it,
right? That's it. It had $350,000. So that
Hallmark movies have more than that.
Yeah, that's not a huge budget. That's around what Sam Raimi made Evil Dead for.
Okay.
So. If you don't have a big budget, I think you have to know how to use your special effects. And you either choose to go all in on like 1 or 2 effects, or you can choose not to show the kill, which is the most expensive part of the effect, right? Creating that effect is going to be way more expensive than showing the aftermath. And I think that they were judicious in choosing when we're going to show the kill, right? Like showing her getting stabbed in the back. That's not a very expensive or fancy effect to do.
Especially the way they shot it.
Yeah, the thing, we didn't have to see it ripping through the skin or anything like that.
Exactly. So so that's a very cheap effect to pull off. Everything else, it's like, let's put a decent amount of money into making the after effect look good. And between us hearing them scream, right, and seeing the buildup, and then cutting to, hey, so this is what happened to them in our minds. What we're picturing is maybe even worse than what they could have shown you with an unlimited budget.
Yeah. Well, that's when you get, Judy's death, right? Which is I mean, it's also the way. I mean, obviously it had to be, right? Because again, we're talking that they use children first of all. But I mean, for those who've not seen the movie, Judy is essentially smothered with a pillow while Angela takes Judy's curling iron that she was just using, so it is hot, and shoves it up her cooch. And that's the end of, and then she just you know what? You who likes their roast beef heated up? But then she just moves the bed a little bit away from the wall, and all you see is Judy's feet getting dunk dunk falling, and then the bed gets pushed over, and they'll find her eventually. Who cares?
Yeah.
But
it's
what's
brutal.
Happened.
It's brutal. You
think about that
wince and I don't have a vagina, and yet I was having phantom pain.
Yeah, exactly. Stop and just think about that. And nowadays, I wonder if they were to do a death like that, if with all this torture porn and the Saw movies and all that, if it would obviously you would never get that graphic. I don't think they would actually show the insertion.
Eli Roth would.
Probably he would.
If anyone would, it would be
if anybody would, it would be him. But I think they would get a lot closer to showing it like going like between the woman's legs. You know, if nothing else, like it would be more overt about like, hey, oh, no, wait, I'm going to show you because I don't think you're smart enough to figure it out on your own. Like I'm going to take you by the hand and show you this. You know,
I'm sitting there watching it. And I was watching it on my phone because the kids were around and stuff. So I'm watching it on my phone. I got my Bluetooth headphones in, and my wife is folding laundry, and I just took an earpiece out, and I was like, "This girl just got a curling iron shoved in her cooch." And she was like, "Oh my god, what are you watching? What does that even look like?" And I was like, "It was silhouetted, but it sounded bad."
I could probably draw you a picture. You got some crayons?
There's got to be an easier way to straighten your pubes.
Yeah.
And then we mentioned it earlier, but I think one of the most effective special effects is Angela's face at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Right. Like you mentioned, Ish, it was like a cast of her face, but they didn't make a mask because they kind of had the foresight to think this is going to be worn by a man, right? Whose face is probably going to be wider than Angela's, right? She's how old was she? 13, 14-year-old girl.
14, yeah.
You know, so whoever wears this mask is going to deform the mask. It will not end up looking like Felissa Rose. So I think they very smartly made it out of like plaster or vinyl or something like that. It was hard. And that way the shape would be retained by it's almost like a death mask, right?
Yeah.
And so the special effects artist found some glass eyes which had the same color to them as Felissa Rose's did. They found, you know, real hair to plug into there, and what you end up having is a face that looks identical to hers. And so, it's absolutely terrifying. She talks about doing that and feeling uncomfortable and not really knowing how uncomfortable it was, and saying that if she were asked to do it now, she probably would say, "No, I'm not doing it." Like just having that plaster on your face for that long is just terrible. But it leads to such an effective shot. Like you said, Ish, there's no way that they're going to put like a prosthetic or a strap on or something like that on a 13-year-old girl. I mean, number one, she probably wouldn't allow it. Number two, the mom wouldn't allow it. You know, I'm sure the director.
Pretty sure there's laws about that too.
Yeah, let's say.
Yeah, I mean,
the government.
You can't strap a sex toy onto a teenager these days, you know.
And this is how we got on QAnon.
So I mean, really, that's the only thing you're left with. You can't CGI a penis onto her. Not in not in that attitude. Not in 1983. Today you could. I mean, they did it to, you know, Dr. Manhattan, you know, quite effectively. Quite effectively. But yeah, I mean, the only choice you have is to get a dude and throw that mask on a dude. And it leads to, I think, a really effective and creepy shot.
Yeah, and I know we talked about it at the top, but just like you said, so often it's like, all right, you know, here's the twist or here's the big reveal, and now we're going to show you what happens after. Like, no, you know nothing now. That's it.
For all you know, she killed everyone after those credits rolled.
I do think, and I know that this isn't special effects talk, and it goes back to plot, but a lot of movies, when they have a twist ending, they force you to go back and analyze the plot and say, like Saw does, like High Tension does, and
anything by Shyamalan.
Anything by Shyamalan, and you either end up enjoying the movie so much more for the fact that twist was set up properly,
Saw.
And there are no holes in there, which I think Saw does really well, which I think like Sixth Sense does really well, right? You mentioned Shyamalan. So there's movies like that, and then there's movies like High Tension.
High Tension. I was waiting until you were like, or the ones where it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, where the twist seems great at the end. You're like, holy fuck, my mind was just blown. And then you stop and you start talking to your friends about it. You're like, whoa, hang on a second. How'd this happen?
Yeah.
This is impossible. Like, whoa, hang on a second. Forget about that thing. How's this other thing possible? And then you realize that the whole movie just kind of falls apart. You pull on one thread, and all of a sudden your sweater's gone, and all you've got is like this giant like pile of thread on the floor.
Or if you're at Sleepaway Camp, a really cute crop top.
I think that Robert Hertzlich did a fantastic job in giving us just enough information to keep us guessing all the way along. And if you go back and you rewatch the movie, there's nothing in there that contradicts Angela being the killer. The
only thing I would say, and it doesn't contradict, it's just the cardio that she would have to have to sprint into the woods, kill those kids that threw sand at her with an axe, sprint back to the camp, kill Meg with the curling iron, and then get out into the woods to shoot the counselor in the throat with the arrow. All happen in a very tight window.
I mean, I get it, but you know, I had a lot of energy at 13.
But then, like I said, it's not necessarily a plot hole. It's just like, and it's not like it was ever a plot point that she didn't participate in sports because she couldn't physically or because because she was out of shape. She just said she was fine with watching. But that was the one thing this time where I was like, damn, she really covered the map on this last night. Like this was full berserker mode. Yeah, even if the campgrounds themselves aren't that large, it is a large area to cover. And then still show up to her like late night date with the hair just perfectly coiffed.
There's no excuse.
All done right.
There's no excuse to have your hair not done for a date.
It's 83. That's the era of Aquanet, right? It would probably look exactly like that for all of the kills.
And no blood. Yeah. Because it acted as like a nice shield.
Because it's Scotch guarded.
Right.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right. So I think we've pretty much covered just about everything when it comes to Sleepaway Camp. Ish suggest we always do a unique rating system. This is something that Jeff originally started on Shiver all the way back with our very first episode when we did The Exorcist back in 2017. And I can't remember what he suggested. But when I told Ish about this, he was like, okay, we have to do as a rating system curling irons to the coochie. So I said, I can't possibly think of anything better than that.
Not for a second.
So, Daniel, out of 5 possible curling irons to the coochie, how many curling irons to the coochie do you give this movie?
So one thing that I've had to keep in mind as we do this show is we give each one a unique rating system, right? Because I constantly kind of have the argument with myself about, well, what did I give this one? And what is it compared to that one? But luckily we're not, it changes every time. So I don't have to compare this to what I gave, The Shining or anything like that, because that was a different rating system. So that being said, I adore this movie. I think it is done absolutely beautifully. I think it is very aware of what it is. I think that the shock factor is there. I think there are just a lot of things to really, really love about this movie. And damn it, I give this movie 5 curling irons to the coochie. I love it.
I want to take a clip of that, of you saying, I give 5 curling irons to the coochie, and just make that my ringtone.
Isolate that. Isolate that.
You hear that, Neri? Go ahead and edit that out. He's not here.
That we know of.
That we know of, yeah. Ish, what about you?
Oh man, so okay, I love this movie. So I almost want to I want to give it 5 five curling irons to the coochie, just from a nostalgia, and just like, again, I love movies that are not quote unquote good, and I also love any movie where the teenager could feasibly either be 11 or 36. So I'm gonna give it 5, but it's true. Like Judy alone in one movie, there are some angles where I'm like, she's 12, she's 40, she's 17. I think she just turned 32. Like, from like scene to scene, that poor girl. It's like she goes through like all the stages of man.
It's the awkwardness of puberty, man.
And that big ass side pony.
It's the damn hair, is what it is.
That is one of the most legendary side ponies I think I've ever seen.
She has like Bible camp hair. It's too much. But I'm gonna go with 5. I think if I was rating it as like, is it a quote unquote good movie, I'd probably go closer to like 3.5. Curling irons to the coochie, but 5 curling irons out of 5 to the cooch, because it is what it is, and it knows it. I don't think at any moment it tries to be anything more, anything less. And if you just go along for the ride, you won't be disappointed.
I have to agree with you all. This I knew it from before I rewatched it. Whenever we got around to Sleepaway Camp, this was going to be a 5-star for me. And I'm a fairly generous critic when it comes to these sorts of movies that I feel nostalgic about. But everything you guys have said is absolutely correct. You have to take every movie on its own merits. You have to watch a movie for what it is instead of what it isn't. We talked about this when we did Demon Night.
I love that movie. I love that episode. I love that episode. I love that movie.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's very similar to Demon Night. It's not. This isn't a movie that takes itself seriously. You approach it, I think, as a viewer the same way that the director did, and the director wanted to shock you. I was shocked. Yes. The first time I watched this movie, I continue to be shocked. When I watch this movie, I love thinking about this movie and the implications of what this means for society as I continue to watch this movie and our social consciousness continues to grow. I love the fact that there's an authenticity to it about the children. I love the fact that I get to see a snake crawling out of a half decomposed body that's only been in the water for a couple of hours. I think there is so much to love about this movie that anything you could possibly throw at me and say, yeah, but gets batted away. It gets batted away with a stick with a beehive at the end of it with no bees coming out of it. All right. So how could this get anything other than 5 curling irons to the coochie? It has to. It absolutely has to. So
has any Shiver movie ever gotten such a unanimous rating? And I apologize because I know I sound a little weird now. My phone was dying, so I had to plug in. But
not since I've been on have we had an Around the Horn 5 like that.
I think going back a pre-hiatus, so this is probably sometime around 2018. We did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I'm pretty sure that everyone gave it a 5.
Fair.
Fair enough, as I think that might be it's certainly one of the greatest horror movies of all time. It might be my favorite. So it's a really good one. I would like to thank you, Ish, for
thank you guys for having me,
coming on and being here. I'm so happy that we were finally able to make this happen. I look forward to having you on again because
I have a suggestion, by the way. I have a suggestion. I will take it offline and let you know, but I have a suggestion for another movie I'd like to come back for.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Wow. All right. So you can catch Ish and our good friend DJ on the Beto Let Me Tell You podcast. Do you want to throw out some social media info?
It's at Better Let Me Tell You on Instagram, on Facebook as well. You can find us on all streaming podcast platforms. We drop a new episode every Friday. We've had the pleasure of having this gentleman David as a co-host. Also, your wife's been on as a co-host. I think probably more times than I've been on as a co-host of my own show. It's just it's a fun time, and I always say we've been doing this now for 4 years, but one of the best things about it is that we get to meet people like yourselves, who we would not have met had it not been for this crazy podcast world. So, that's, to me, that's the best part of
Absolutely.
it, not just the free swag.
I promise you your shirt's in the mail. You can catch other Geek Bro podcasts like Better Let Me Tell You and Shiver on the Geek Bro network. You can go to geekbro.net and find a whole bunch of them there. There is Mount Geekmore, which Daniel and I are on. There is What's Up Bro. There is the newly released seasons. There is the Comedy Fitness, Dose of Ellie.
Brand new
about,
Kick Flicks.
Kick Flicks, yeah, that
Flicks.
just came out this week. So very excited about that one as a martial arts fan myself. That's exciting to see this come out. So we've got something for everyone here at the Geek Bro Network. So on behalf of everyone here at Shiver, fright you very much.